All right, welcome back to part two, the extended version of the Canadian Gun Vault Behind the Vault Door this week. Subject that didn't get covered. Let's talk about the Las Vegas mass shooting, the conspiracy theories. There is so much floating around right now. It is not even funny. I could tell you already from if my experience in policing, and I was with the service for 20 years, more or less, in one capacity or another. I got to see a lot. And I could tell you that I don't think that we are going to have any conclusive ending to this story and what happened in Las Vegas ever. It is going to be another man on the grassy knoll type situation. Like, we're going to be talking about this one 40 years from now. I won't be here, certainly, but many of you that are young today will remember this, and you'll look back and they'll say, well, they never figured it out. I could tell you right now that we've got multiple windows knocked out. I'm hearing about the space between the rooms or the room. I'm hearing about shell casings and, the muzzle report and how it didn't sound like 223. I mean, when I first heard the initial videos with Brian, my good friend Brian, he called it immediately. I looked at him and said, you're right. Something's off with the cyclic rate. And, that low level frequency muzzle report. If you're sitting at home right now and you're thinking, oh boy, the Canadian Gun Vault's putting on his tinfoil hat, I rule nothing out. We've heard so much, so much insanity over the years has come from the government. And then we find out like decades later, like, really, they did that? Like, oh my God. So in this day and age, why not? Sleight of hand and, magic tricks have been around since the dawn of time. I'm sure there was a caveman that got freaked out when, somebody discovered, a sudden, a sudden technique to, distract them. To talk about things like that Vegas shooting and to start with the conspiracy theories like right away, I can't imagine a world where people would fall for, things like shell casings on top of blood splatter instead of blood splatter on the shell casings. He was already dead when those shell casings got on the floor. It's just like there's so much information floating around now. It's just unbelievable. And of course, the anti-gunners have jumped all over it. And I'm looking at it this way. I didn't do that. And I know, like, literally now, tens of thousands of people that don't do that. So, and they own guns and they're not freaking out. So, like, you're telling me because that one idiot loses his marbles that I'm going to somehow be punished for that when I'll never do that. So, what they're telling you is that this group of people that would like to see, more gun laws in place, the people that really just outwardly do not like guns, they're actually a very small but vocal population. And, we've been fighting with them for years. The pro-gunners, the anti-gunners, and then you got all these people in between. There's like 80%, it's like 10%, really, people love guns. And, they haven't really talked about it much to their detriment. You've got this quiet group of people that doesn't bother anybody and they obey all the rules and yet they're constantly picked on. If we were a real problem, there's apparently something like 20 plus million firearms in this country, and I can't even imagine how many rounds of ammunition, they got stored up. And you know what? If we were going to be a problem, and I always hear this and laugh, you'd know it by now. So, you've got this one guy that goes off the rails in Vegas, and somehow this is going to impact us in Canada. And right now, I'm sure there's a lot of people, that are demanding gun control immediately in the U.S. And, we tend to mirror their policies, I've noticed, as it relates to gun control. And so, there's this giant outcry in the U.S. right now to do something about the gun violence and let's ban this. And, it's really unfortunate, but the anti-gunners really do prey on the fear. And making a public announcement that we're going to tighten up gun controls right after there's a mass shooting. Good job, Ralph. You could have said that, 5 weeks ago. There isn't a problem. There wasn't a problem then. That's why you didn't say anything. But you know what? The public's demanding some answers. So what's your first, response? We're going to do something about it. Well, that's terrifically reactive. And kind of, some backward thinking. How about preventative? How about we start to look at things like, changing our culture? Making people accept responsibility for their actions. I really do believe in this, and I try and stay away from the philosophy and that portion of the Canadian firearm community psyche. But there's this mistrust. I trust the people I know that know how to use their firearms. I trust them to operate those firearms, to maintain them, to secure them. I don't have a problem with that. And yet, there's always a group of people that seem to have the worst case scenario playing out in their minds. And somehow I'm being made, to pay for that. And whether it means I got to give up my property and the government seizes it, or, they say you can keep it, but you can't leave the house with it. So they really kind of regulate unnecessarily. The movement of items like 12 4s and 5s. And for those of you that don't know what those are, 12 4 and 5 firearms, category firearms here in Canada, are guns that used to be completely legal. A lot of them were like non-restricted, and there was never a problem with them. These guns weren't being used in crimes. They were not. The AR-15 I remember got used once in a shooting, I believe, in like the mid to late 80s. If I'm not mistaken, it was the late 80s. And yeah, it would have been the late 80s, early 90s even. There was an AR-15 involved in a shooting, but beyond that, this was a non-restricted gun, just like a shotgun, or your favorite varmint rifle. It just happened to be, semi-automatic. And, these guns, got placed into restricted category. Other guns, like AK-47s and Steyr AUGs, they got pushed into this 12.5 category, along with like G3s, HK, really cool guns, got pushed into this 12.5 category. And of course, their, submachine gun, semi-auto only counterparts in these semi-automatic like Uzis and MAC-10s and these smaller guns got put into this 12.4 category. And, the movement of these items is strictly regulated. They don't go to the range to shoot them. For whatever reason, they just don't allow the permit to be issued a lot of times, is the general consensus in the firearm community. I think that if you clearly demonstrate that you're just a rational person that would like to take in, a little bit of shooting with one of his old guns, and would like to ask permission to do that. I think if you ask politely and said, I would just like to take the one gun to the range and to enjoy it for an afternoon. I bought it, in the early 90s before the law change, and I would like to take it out if that's okay with you. I would think that they would probably say yes. And it'd be nice to see the AKs out again. I would really like to see, my buddy's Hungarian folder, come out, and, to be able to enjoy it, to get permission, to use your own property and enjoy it, the way you intended to when you bought it and when you paid taxes on it. So here's this property you bought, and there was a sudden change in law, and they told you, no, you can keep it, but you're going to keep it indoors, and you can't shoot it anymore. And it's like, all right, well, can I sell it to somebody? Well, you can't sell it to anybody else but who has the same gun. And so they really restrict the movement of these things. And the values are terribly diminished, which is really kind of sad to see. I know there's a whole ton of restricted owners there in the Canadian firearm community that would love nothing more than to have an HK MP5, a semi-auto one, not a machine gun, just an HK, would be really cool, or the K model, the little short one with the the foregrip. They made a semi-auto pistol with this sleeve on it instead of the foregrip, but it was an easy change out to get that machine gun look. But they're limited to 5 and 10 rounds, just like anything else. And these prohibited items, they have restrictions on the magazine capacities. So you could have literally 5 rounds of 9mm in this big giant semi-auto Uzi carbine. And nobody would tuck it underneath their jacket coat. And nobody would really want to carry in this day and age, something that clunky. So why can't I own, a semi-auto Thompson, that's been made specifically, like this whole idea of variant. They banned these guns back in the mid 90s, and they had no idea what they were. And then they used this term variant, and they said, okay, these are the evil looking guns, and you can't have all these. And it doesn't matter that they wouldn't, fail miserably and be certified and approved of by the RCMP today. There's a whole bunch of guns on this giant list of prohibited firearms that would probably make the cut today with the current criteria and how easily something is converted into a fully automatic gun. And again, we're talking about what's easily converted. If you really knew what you were doing and had the proper machinery, nowadays with the internet, you can plug in a 3D printer and it can make something for you out of nothing. And so the technology exists. The people that want to own these things want to collect them and want to shoot them, and they want to see them preserved. And there's a large group of people within our firearm community that would like to own these things again and see them, in circulation. You can control it. I would suggest that the government still maintain control of these items, as they do all the other restricted guns. I don't understand why, I can take a VZ58, an AR-15 rifle, my two other bolt guns, but I can't bring out this G3, which I'm going to use the exact same way. It's going to operate the same way, and it feels different. And if you've never fired a G3 before, it's like the Cadillac, especially of the vintage guns. You get yourself a nice classic HK, the semi-auto version. It's beautiful shoot. If you think the Swiss Arms is cool, the HKs are gorgeous. And they're vintage. These are guns from the 70s. Really cool time periods. A lot of stuff going on in the 70s. When I think back, that was a terrifically tumultuous year. I'm a product of the 70s myself. I wasn't young enough to remember the early 70s, but I remember, by the late 70s, things were pretty exciting, and there was still, a lot of people talking about Vietnam and the boat people, as we used to call them. I was raised Catholic, and I apologize to anybody out there that, doesn't want to be referred to as boat people. For the Vietnamese, when they traversed to our country in the early 80s, when I was just a boy, I was laughing about it tonight. The Catholic priest in the church I was in made them all stand up, and they said, hey, we were welcoming the boat people. And, to say that today, it's wow, we really were kind of ignorant in some respects. Oh, the people off the boat, they just got off the boat, and they're now, our new friends are now in the church. They're very glad to be here. And you could see these people were just stunned. I guess we looked pretty friendly to the Vietnamese after they had rushed out of the country, not wanting to have any part of that awful conflict. I'm not going to get into it with people whether or not I think it was the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do. I'm not in charge of nations. I don't profess to understand history enough to make any determination on whether or not it was a justifiable thing or not. Certainly there's a lot of people that feel both ways about it. But back to where these people arrived, we're accepting, and and I think back to that moment. And I think about how those people must have felt, finding a community, where they felt right at home, immediately. People were nice, and that's really what I see, is the future of firearms. In our community, we're just so welcoming. You get people from just about every background. If you haven't taken up shooting yet, try it. Definitely, if you got a friend that does it, reach out to them. Offer to buy ammo. That's always a good one. If you get in touch with your friend who's been shooting a while or has been telling you got to come out, have him take you to the gun store, buy some ammo so he's not completely out of pocket. Buy some ammo and say, look, I really would like to, try shooting. Can we go to the gun store together, and can I buy some ammo and we'll go? You'd be amazed the kind of terrific friendship you can develop with people that way. There's a lot of bonding that goes on the firing line. And a lot of people, I don't think, understand that. I'm sure people think that fishing is the ultimate relaxation, or yoga, or playing golf is another one I hear often. For a lot of people out there, it's firearms. Getting on the line, relaxing, breathing, forgetting the world out there. Really, pulling focus, mastering a skill, and gradually getting better and better at something is always good for the human spirit, in my opinion. You get to the range and you take a deep breath. You got all this noise, and I mean, for the people that aren't familiar with firearms, to hear all these loud bangs going off, I'm sure they're sitting there saying, "How could you possibly relax in this environment?" I can tell you that when you are, flying solo on the line, or to have the bangs going off, you just kind of get used to it. And but to really pull focus, so it's just you and this target, and you get this tunnel vision, and you breathe out and relax. And I mean, everything from the way you hold the gun to how smoothly you pull the trigger, will determine how successful you are in your result. So there's this almost like meditative element to shooting that I think sometimes people are just completely unaware of. But if you're ever on the line, you're just kind of mindlessly blasting away, take a moment, and this is the way I like to explain it to people. Take a moment, all right? Focus on your sights as intently as you can, right? After the gun's been made ready to fire, and then you begin to pull that trigger, and then it becomes about the relationship between your finger and the trigger group. And so the way I tell people to get best results, and I'm saying short distances with handguns, because that's really a challenging one for a lot of people, to pull the trigger as slowly as possible, the way you would if nothing was coming out of it. So you're not thinking about the things like the sudden jump and the flash and the recoil, but you're thinking instead about pulling that trigger as slowly as you can, as you're breathing out, and just focusing completely on the front target and that sight. And so once you create that perfect sight picture, and the gun is in your hand, right, and you've disengaged the safety, for the safety Nazis out there, I'm going to say that you flip that off. But when you're breathing out and you're holding that sight picture as intently as you can, you pick that smallest spot possible in the center of the blade of your sight. So you're not just aiming for the bullseye, you're aiming for the center of the bullseye. And you squeeze that trigger gently without disturbing the gun, so that it goes off in your hand like it would if you were expecting the hammer to drop and nothing happened. If you do that, you'll really get a sense for how relaxing it can be. Because you really develop this kind of fine sense of, there's an awareness between you and the machine in your hand, and it's a very rewarding experience, and one that I find very therapeutic. And if you add a little bit of recoil to that, there's that greater sensation of, harnessing something, more powerful, and to hit things further away. I totally get the long distance guys. I got a buddy, he's awesome. He's this emergency room doctor, and he's like a total wingnut. I love him to pieces. He's so much fun. The guy, you could tell he has like his regular life. It's very serious. And then he gets to the line and he becomes this other personality I love, and he loves long range shooting, and I'm definitely going to drag his ass out, or I should say he's going to drag mine out. I want to go do some of this 1,000-yard shooting he's talking about on metallic steel with these monstrous rifles that have to be carried in backpacks that look like howitzer cannons disassembled on their backs. 338 Lapua, for the people out there that have never seen this thing, it's like this slimmer, smaller version of a 50 BMG. It's clearly a smaller round, but I mean, it can be loaded heavy, and the thing's got some real stopping power. So I can't wait to get out there and bring a little steel with him somewhere up north. I'm not sure where we're going, but you know what, hey, I'll pack the sandwiches. I'm hoping he'll give me a ring, and I really apologize for not getting back to you sooner, buddy, but it's just been kind of crazy, and there's a lot of people I want to go shooting with, and I would say right away to everybody out there, please forgive me for not having enough time. I really don't get as much shooting in as I want to. So if you think I'm out there on the line all the time, I can tell you that, a lot of times it's not really I'm getting a chance to enjoy myself and relax. It's whether we're filming or, we're doing the photography, I don't really get to pull the trigger as much as I like. And I've been criticized for it. It's are you ever going to pull the trigger on a gun? And so I'm hoping to get out a few more times, than I have in the last 6 months, and try and enjoy myself a little bit and kind of reinsert myself back into the community. I know everybody out there thinks I'm out there just shooting nonstop. It's not quite like that, I can assure you. But I'm enjoying myself, but it's a lot of work. But I'm hoping to get in a little R&R time and a little trigger time myself, because there hasn't been enough of that, I think, in my life lately. So I'm definitely going to do that. But back to the Las Vegas shooting. For the people out there that have got their tinfoil hats on, don't even bother. I mean, they're just going to have you running around in circles, chasing facts. We will never know the truth. I think that if you've got the FBI swooping in right away and saying this is a terrorist act, we're taking over. I mean, I think at that point, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Far be it from me to accuse the government of engaging in any sort of conspiracy. That is not my style. I would suggest to you, though, that historically, leaders have lied to us. They have misled us. So, it would not be wrong of us to, scrutinize things carefully, especially during tense times. And certainly the world looks like a pretty tense place right now. When I'm, again, back to that Wingmaster pump action rifle, pump action shotgun from 1970. I look back at things like, the 70s. Nixon had secretly ordered, an invasion in Cambodia, and the public found out when they lost their marbles. And, it was, again, tense times, much like now. And throughout the course of that, there was a shooting involving students that got shot by the National Guard in 1970. I mean, it was just a crazy time, and here I am looking at the shotgun today from 1970, and I'm thinking, there's just so many cool things that happened in 1970. Why wouldn't somebody want to own that? It's this beautiful Wingmaster, 26-inch shotgun. And it's from 1970. I mean, it really speaks to a different time. The Beatles, got their last album, Let It Be. That was going to be their last big performance as a group before they disbanded. 1970 was just a wild time, and I'm seeing a lot of things happening now that certainly are mirroring some of the more tumultuous points in history. So all the more important that we preserve these items, all of them, to remember history. I certainly, if my history teacher had taught me in high school with firearms and some of the years and fantastic moments in time that they represent, I probably would have been paying more close attention. Anyway, that's about all the time we have for this week's episode of Behind the Vault Door. I'm the Canadian Gun Vault. I hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving. Happy holidays, folks.